Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the meeting. Let's get started in order to respect everyone's time, and we'll get started with some housekeeping. This will allow other folks to join while we just do our introduction and housekeeping. Um, we just want to make sure for those of us who are not that familiar with Zoom, please keep, when you're not speaking or asking a question or providing us your valuable feedback, that you keep the mute button on. It'll be great if folks can write their name, and if they're a resident or a business owner, if you feel comfortable. It's always nice to know that, and that would be our virtual sign-in. Please feel free to type in your questions or comments anytime during the meeting. We will be reviewing them, and Holly and other folks from the city will try to read those questions if we have not answered them. And then the final request is to please raise your hand and lower it after you have made your feedback or shared it with the rest of us. This will make sure that we are then calling on people whose questions have not been heard. And then if you are unable to use your smartphone or laptop or any other similar device, please feel free to call us at 669-900-6833 and use the meeting ID 852-358-5105 to dial in. And you can always visit the city's website, bit.ly/reimagine Ventura, to review all the meeting materials. One final request, since this is a virtual meeting, we want to make sure we all respect each other's voice and hear each other's opinion. Like I briefly mentioned, we will try to answer all questions today. But in case we are not able to, we will follow up with more detailed responses. During the initial presentation, we request everybody to keep their Zoom on mute, but feel free to ask us questions and provide your feedback during the presentation phase, as well during the group discussion phase. Lastly, please remember this is just one community meeting in a longer community engagement process. We had a great community meeting 2 days ago on July 20th, and we have an online community survey that's going to be open till September 15th. So please feel free to provide your survey feedback, and also ask your friends, neighbors, and business owners to provide their feedback. And with that, I'm going to request Michelle to welcome the community participants. Michelle. Michelle, I'm going to request you to please unmute. That's great.
Okay, I should be unmuted now.
Yes, great.
Okay, good. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Welcome to the meeting. I'm Michelle Levy, and I lead the city's urban design studio. We're really happy to bring to you today the culmination of several years of effort building up to this phase 2 of the Reimagine Ventura project. This effort is really the result of tremendous community input and collaboration. So I'd like to thank all of the Woodland Hills stakeholders who have been involved in this since 2016. We had a good crowd joining us on Tuesday, and we're happy to see good participation today as well. So the Ventura Boulevard improvements are being designed in 2 phases. And currently the improvements in phase 1, which involve a signalized crosswalk at Ponce, restriping of the street, crosswalks, and diagonal parking. That phase is considered phase 1. And right now, this is in the early stages of the bidding process, and there's about $1.5 million allocated to the implementation of phase 1. Today, we're going to talk to you about the other street improvements that complement the phase 1 improvements. And these are really aimed at creating character and adding layers to Ventura Boulevard that really contribute to creating a sense of place. So what we're trying to do is to create, a Main Street feel in Woodland Hills, like you might see in portions of Ventura Boulevard and Sherman Oaks, in Culver City, or other neighborhoods you may have visited where you've enjoyed walking around and dining outdoors, and just a comfortable kind of shade-filled environment. That's what we're aiming to create here in this section of Ventura Boulevard. And so that's what we're here to discuss today. This is not the end of the process. We're really interested in hearing your feedback on the renderings and diagrams that we're going to show you today. And with that, I'd like to introduce our team. So today we have Holly Harper, who is the project lead with the Urban Design Studio. She's been managing the phase 2 portion of the project. And Mukul Malhotra with MIG is our consultant, and he'll be walking through the presentation today. I'd also like to recognize Stephen and Farah from MIG, who have done an incredible job on the graphics that you're going to see today. We hope you're excited as we are. We also, a huge thank you to the Council Office CD3 for spearheading this effort. So with that, I'll hand it back to Mukul to continue the presentation.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And like Michelle said, our agenda for today's meeting is to start with a very brief presentation that summarizes the different community design concepts and ideas that we have developed, and then primarily focus on hearing your feedback and have a group discussion about what should the future sidewalk and landscape improvements, what do we like about them that we are discussing today, and what should be the highest priority improvements. With that, just as we all step back, it's important to remember that our project area essentially goes from Royer Avenue to Sale. The project goals are clearly to improve the overall comfort for all users of the street, people who walk, bike, roll, take transit, or drive. We want to create a lively, active walking and bicycle environments, but it is critical that all the improvements take into account the businesses, the local mom and pop shops that are valuable to creating and strengthening the Main Street experience, and then maximize improvements that achieve several co-benefits, be it improving the overall tree canopy and other greenery that reduces the urban heat island effect, support pollinators with improved planting, and then also improve the water quality. We clearly heard from the community there is a great deal to enhance the overall identity. Again and again, the community members shared with us that they want to celebrate this part of Ventura Boulevard to become the Woodland Hills Main Street. This will help us guide future grant applications in phase 2 improvements that Michelle talked about. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that this is built on a strong foundation of your feedback, stakeholders, as well as community members. And then lastly, again, emphasizing that this is phase 2 of the improvements, but it definitely complements and builds upon phase 1 improvements that focus more on the signage and striping, improving parking, amenities, and of course, improving the overall safety for all users of the street. So the project goals build upon, like I said, the phase one improvements, which are focusing on creating diagonal parking, striping, increased opportunities for people to cross the street. Um, and this is our generally our existing condition right now, as you see this. And the phase one, what phase one tries to do is put in the reverse angle parking, contiguous bicycle facilities, where possible, put in landscape medians. Um, and this is building on what other cities have done um, for the last few years. You're seeing examples of Mission Avenue in Oceanside or in Santa Barbara, or more closer to home in Pasadena on Garfield, as well as Vista Avenues. And this in turn is building on what other cities have done outside the Los Angeles County area. That includes, of course, on the left, you see Congress Avenue in Austin, or more closer, we see it in San Diego, which actually Stephen lives along this street. So if we need to, we can request him to share with us how he experiences a very similar street. Um, but in terms of phase two, and what is the primary focus of this meeting, we are really focusing on what's happening along the sidewalks, wherever we get opportunities with bulb outs within the parking lanes, and then, of course, focus on the median wherever we get these opportunities. We are definitely building on past community and concurrent community efforts, including the 1997 Woodland Hills Streetscape Plan and the more relatively recent Phase 1 engineering plans and the citywide Vision Zero action plan. Our project process was in 4 different phases. The first, about 2-3 years, we started with existing conditions analysis. A critical component was that we did a number of stakeholder and focus group meetings that provided us valuable feedback. That was then married into the visioning and alternatives that we did in spring on 2019. The COVID-19 was a bit of a hiccup, but we continued to look at the different alternatives that we had discussed with the community. And laid out the emerging design layout. And now we are in the very last phase of the project, which is to finalize the preferred alternative. And as a result, we are going through the 2 community workshops. This is the second of the 2 community workshops. And of course, the survey that will continue till September 15th. I know some of you were there for the initial stakeholder meetings that we did. You can see we recorded all your comments, and that in turn helped us come up with the overall vision for this project. And at the first community workshop that happened a couple of years ago, we played with different alternatives. We heard how you wanted us to explore different concepts and alternatives, be it when it was a narrower sidewalk or a wider sidewalk along the 4 blocks between Royer and Ponce. So building on that, affirming, it's important to keep in mind what was your vision was definitely ensure safety, make it comfortable for all users, ensure enhanced walkability and bikeability, build on economic development. The local businesses are critical to us and ensuring a Main Street experience, but also celebrate the identity and it being the main street of Woodland Hills, and sustainability, integrating it through trees, shade, reducing the concrete impact that we have right now. And last but not the least, any and all improvements should go in if they are maintainable. With that, you also gave us about the top 8, 9, 10 key physical improvements that you would like us to see all along the corridor. The first, of course, being safe and visible crosswalks. And we get increased opportunities both at Royer with a signalized intersection and crosswalks, high visibility crosswalks. And similarly, we see new improved visible crosswalks at Ponds, which would have a pedestrian beacon hawk signal out there. You also told us if safety means also better pedestrian lighting all along the corridor, um, as well making sure the sidewalks have certain amenities that increase the overall experience of the street, be it signage, be it trash cans, some limited seating only at key points, and primarily single seating like you see in this area that encourages more people to pause as they are waiting for outdoor retail opportunities or wait for people who are um, if, in the adjoining businesses. Improved bus stops as we wait for the bus, and allow for more opportunities for people to take transit, amenities that encourage walkability, and also complement the buffered bike lanes that are being envisioned as part of the phase one project that include bicycle racks. Um, Having opportunities within the sidewalk that would encourage more of our local businesses to be able to use some of the widest sidewalks to have opportunities for outdoor retail, especially outdoor dining. We have a number of great cafes and restaurants, and we want them to have more opportunities to use the sidewalk, and increase the overall experience, especially our Main Street experience. Ensuring that we celebrate identity, be it through art, sculpture, that celebrates what's so unique about this part of Woodland Hills, but also ensuring that we have an identity. For example, we heard a lot about folks talking about, hey, can we have sculpture and identity celebrated through the unique tree and landscape of this area that in turn talks about the history of this area too. Identity needs to incorporate signage, be it for the local businesses or celebrating the Woodland Hills Main Street experience. And then wherever possible, having stormwater planters, more pervious surfaces to improve the water quality. And last but not the least, any and all streetscape amenities need to be such or selected in a way that they are clean and they can be well maintained by by the city. Um, with that in mind, we took all of these great feedback for different types of physical improvements, and we began to incorporate them along the corridor, keeping in mind that they're really too big, what I call prototypical experiences. Essentially, the red that you see on this map is really where our sidewalks are more about around 10 feet. Sometimes they go down to 7 feet. But primarily along our corridor, what you see in blue are wider sidewalks that are about 20 feet wide and allow us more opportunities for outdoor retail and dining. So let's jump into the very first prototypical condition where the sidewalks are wider, about 20 feet wide. This is more an existing prototypical experience. We have some trees, not a lot, but we experience what is clearly a really harsh, wide concrete sidewalk and a very harsh asphalt. What we clearly heard from the community, let's improve the sidewalks, provide opportunities for dining, shade providing trees, and incorporate these amenities within the sidewalk, provide some, not a lot, but a few opportunities here and there for people to sit in single seating elements, complemented with providing sidewalk amenities such as the bicycle racks, as well as more importantly, for identity improvements, be it signage or sculptural amenities. Within the parking lane, continue that experience with drought tolerant, uh, easily maintainable landscape, be it planting or with shade providing trees. And what do we experience that if we are driving or in the middle of the corridor? Um, Clearly, the desire is to make sure we still can see the experience that is being created along the sidewalk, ensure the traffic continues to move smoothly as has been proposed in the phase one improvements, but also allow for some opportunities wherever possible. We have medians to allow for some landscaping to happen to create a sense of arrival and make sure people who are even just driving through can understand, hey, this is a main street of the Woodlands Hills neighborhood and it should be respected as such, thereby increasing more opportunities for local destination experiences. Um, with that, let's go to the other kind of experience we have, which is namely when the sidewalks are a little bit narrower, about 10 feet wide. Again, what is common in the 20 feet wide sidewalk experience is we have very wide uh, spaces or impervious surfaces, be it concrete sidewalks that are not in that good shape, or the roadway, which is a sea of asphalt. The desire is to have similar improvements that I mentioned in where we have wider sidewalks, namely updating the concrete sidewalks, allowing from some color, be it in the sidewalk or in the planting, providing amenities that include some seating, pedestrian lighting, shade providing trees, drought tolerant landscapes, um, but at the same time also allowing for opportunities for art and signage to celebrate the unique identity of this area. Um, and then as we experience or are allowed more opportunities to cross the street with high visibility crosswalks, we want to make sure they're complemented with similar landscape improvements and new signals, be it at Royer or a pedestrian hawk uh, traffic control at Ponds. Let's just finally walk through from east to west, or rather from west to east, um, and look at the opportunities block by block, starting from a very western edge between Royer to Gomers. Um, you experience it on a day-to-day basis, this wide area. The aim is to start to minimize and minimize the impervious surfaces, allow for opportunities for shade providing trees, um, continue that experience of softening that area within the roadway, but also focus on emphasizing the opportunity we have at Royer with the signalized intersection and the much needed crosswalk improvements that are being envisioned as part of phase one. All of these will have ADA compliant crosswalks or ramps to allow for people of all ages and abilities to be able to safely and comfortably cross the street. Um, as we go eastwards from Gomers to Fallbrook, again, we continue the same palette of improvements, be it shade providing trees, diagonal parking, pedestrian lighting, improved crosswalks across Rigoletto or along Ventura Boulevard, and then looking at opportunities to improve with high visibility crosswalks at Fallbrook 2. The next block between Fallbrook to Ponds, the opportunity is to continue the same palette of improvements, have special paving with the reconstructed sidewalks, incorporate pedestrian lighting and shade providing trees, um, incorporate improved and new crosswalks at Ponds with the pedestrian activated hawk beacon signal, and allow for opportunities for signage as well as wayfinding to celebrate the overall main street experience, but also individual businesses. And then the last block, as we go towards sale, incorporates the same set of pedestrian improvements, including trees, pedestrian lighting, improved bus stops at Sale Avenue, as well as allow for opportunities to celebrate the Main Street experience. Um, the aim is to incorporate a wide variety, a diversity of tree types, making sure we allow for color as well as shade, but also we clearly heard, and this is where we have carefully selected the planting palette to ensure that be it new trees or trees as they become mature, allow for very clear visibility to the individual businesses um, all along the corridor. Um, Complementing the trees would be the understory or planting that will be low water usage, easily maintainable, but also provide some color all along the corridor. In summary, for phase one improvements that Michelle talked about, there's going to be a net gain of about 20 spaces. We are going to get a contiguous 1.2-mile long bicycle facility. And of course, 7 new improved, either new or improved crosswalks. This project is focusing on phase one improvements, and within that, we are going to get about 36,000 square feet of new sidewalks, which are not going to be really sloping, steeply sloping, but really be ADA compliant, so people of all abilities can comfortably experience it. About 50 new trees that are within 37,000 square feet of planting area, 60 new lights, be it pedestrian lights or street lights, 4 improved bus stops, and art and signage all along the corridor. What will it cost us? Essentially, overall, it costs us about $3.4 million, with the primary focus being on sidewalk improvements, but also providing opportunities for trees and planting and pedestrian lighting too. And last but not the least, art and signage also. With that, we would like to jump into our discussion. Holly, if you can help us also add to the 2 new questions that we definitely want to hear back from you, which is namely what you like about these proposed improvements, how would you like to refine them, and what are your preferred high priority improvements, be it improved sidewalks, different amenities like seating areas, trash cans, pedestrian lighting, trees, planting, improved bus stops, art and signage. And we are going to record all of this like we did a couple of days ago on Tuesday evening, with all your thoughts and feedback in what we are calling a mural board. So please provide us your feedback as I switch to our mural board and we begin to record your comments. And Stephen actually has already started to record these comments as he was looking at the feedback. So Holly, do you want to summarize some of the initial feedback that we got while I was presenting? And then we're going to request people to raise their hands so we can request them to share their feedback in real time.
Sure, Mukul, thank you. The one comment we've got from the chat is, is really what is the deal with the backwards parking spaces? I know that this is an unfamiliar treatment, but it does increase safety. Maybe, Mukul, you want to take the first pass at explaining some of the benefits, even though that's not something that people are used to?
Sorry, can you see the mural board now? I just want to confirm that you can.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So Holly, I apologize. Do you mind repeating the question?
No problem. I was just going to say that from throughout this process, from 2016, 2017 meetings about phase one on, there have really been a number of questions and concerns about the back end diagonal parking. And I know this is a really unfamiliar strategy. It did come at, some of the community members that led off and were proponents to getting the council member to initiate this project back in 2016. We're really looking at ways to increase the number of parking spaces, but they do have a number of safety features, even though it's not useful. You want to take, it's not the usual way. You want to take the first pass of just explaining some of why we do this, how it integrates with the bikes, how it, how possibly people can navigate this.
So very briefly, the way the phase 1 improvements with the back-in parking was envisioned is what it clearly does. It improves safety in a number of different ways. Number one, it improves the visibility for both the person parking their cars or when the parked car is trying to come out and move into the moving lane. It improves the visibility significantly, and similarly, it also does improve the safety for bicyclists. And where this really helps is it allows both the driver as well as the bicyclist to have more opportunities to make eye contact. I know our cars are now better in terms of having sensors so that they help, or at least most of our cars do help provide sensors if we are close to an object, but nothing improves the safety more than having direct eye contact. And this back-in or reverse angle parking increases opportunities to do so. So that is automatic safety for both the bicyclists as well as the drivers. Secondly, what it also does with, and this has been implemented in different parts of Southern California, like I showed you in Mission Valley or in Santa Barbara, or more closer on Garfield Avenue or Vista Avenue in Pasadena. What it has really done is people, when they back in and park, kids or people who are sitting in the back seat, it's safer for them to go into the sidewalk. They don't have to come out into the travel lane area. So that dramatically also makes it more family friendly. The same I would say if you have got like 2 bags in your hand and you're trying to get into the car, it again becomes more convenient because the back seat area is closer and so is the rear of your car. So for many of these improvements, we have seen it is more comfortable, but it's also safer for all users of the street. Stephen, I know you live along a very similar street. Do you want to share your experience?
Yes. So the other thing that I was going to point out is that in terms of parking in one of these spaces, it's a very similar movement to parking into a parallel space. You signal, you move over in front of the space, and then you wait till it's clear and you back in. Although it's a lot easier to back into a diagonal reverse spot like this compared to a parallel parking spot, because the amount of space you're given in one of these is always set, as opposed to trying to squeeze into a very tight spot. In terms of the livability of them, as with most things, it takes some getting used to, and every once in a while people will park into them forwards. But with most things, people do eventually get used to them, and then they work pretty seamlessly eventually. And that's been my experience with them.
And I did hear, some of the community members mention that that it will also help sometimes calm traffic while still allowing for the traffic to move through. So if there are some concerns that it will hinder the traffic movement, that is not the case. It actually still allows the traffic to move as it would with other kinds of parking. Please feel free, as Holly, you shared with us other thoughts and questions. I request the community members to please raise their hands if they have specific questions or just thoughts, feedback in general. We would love to hear that too.
And I'd just like to add, if you'd like us to go back to any of the previous slides to see an enlarged image, we can do that as well if it's hard to see on the screen.
And there are, concerns being expressed about the reduction in traffic lanes, what will happen to all the traffic, maintenance of the spaces, of how they will clean. Also concerns about the landscaping impacting visibility. And I'll try to answer just a few of those. There was significant traffic studies were conducted as part of phase 1. And this was a balance between taking this area that now seems more like a freeway, more like an alternative to the 101, which it often serves as the 101 backs up. Balancing, giving this more of a neighborhood feel with not impacting the flow of traffic. And so those traffic studies did indicate that this would not significantly impact the flow of traffic. But what it will do, I think everybody that drives the stretch knows that if it's posted for 35 miles an hour, but if it's not literally at a peak period where traffic is backed up, people drive much, much faster, 50, 60 miles an hour. And that doesn't help anybody, either for safety or for the businesses to have any sense that people even know they're there or what they might have on offer. And I don't want to go into too much traffic engineering 101, but there's a lot of counterintuitive things where we think that driving faster makes the cars flow faster, but really 35 miles an hour is this kind of sweet spot where you can push the maximum number of cars through a given space, because you don't have as much racing up to an intersection just to stop and then queuing and then going. We have definitely spent the last year coordinating with all of the departments. We had a question about street sweeping and maintenance. We do have, with LA Sanitation, we do have smaller equipment now. It's not just one size fits all. And all of the landscaping, this is something that our Streets LA department, engineering and DOT keep the, we still maintain all of the setbacks from driveways for new trees, and all the landscaping won't, even without any kind of, trimming or maintenance, is selected so it will never get above 24 to 36 inches high. And then we got some other ones about exhaust going into the sidewalk, not good. But again,
and that's why, if I may just add, Holly, that planting strip, which is low maintenance, drought tolerant, would help with the buffer. I do want to call upon Janice. She has raised her hand for a long time. So Janice, we would love to hear your feedback. And then after that, I can only read the phone number 310-394. If you don't mind putting your name, so I don't use it as a number, I would really appreciate it. Janice, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I went ahead and started up my video so you can see who I am, and I will state my full name, Janice Hattelstad. I'm a resident of Woodland Hills. I don't live along that particular stretch of Ventura Boulevard. I'm further to the east. Just kind of the elephant in the room, and from my perspective, and I brought this up during the survey feedback request that was sent out recently, is what stands out to me from the diagrams. And I think all the amenities, everything that you're proposing sound wonderful, but the one thing that stands out to me is the continued existence of above ground power lines. And And I realize that this is well beyond the scope of this particular project. But if we're have some kind of an opportunity through other jurisdiction, other funding and so forth, I would hate to miss the opportunity to put those power lines more safely underground and also achieve, to me, a big improvement in aesthetics for that part of the community. That's the big difference to me that I see when I compare in my mind other areas that I visited that have that more neighborhood Main Street feel, is that they don't have visible power lines overhead. Also, we're in a situation with extreme climate change and weather events and so forth that might affect safety going forward. The two things that I'm particularly fond of as far as the amenities that you're proposing are the increase in shade and the bike lanes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Janice. Yeah, that's great. And I know this question of power lines, it comes up again and again and again. And I have reached out to the people at LADWP that are the sort of service coordinators for this part of the city. And while they were not able to give me an exact amount, they really have to do extensive engineering analysis, just where the power is coming from, how it's being distributed, et cetera. But they said for this stretch, it would probably be in the order of at least $4 million just to underground the parking. I mean, the power lines, which is sort of the price tag for every other element we're seeing here. So there's that. I don't know. It has come up as, like I said, it has come up as a priority, but it's sort of a choice. Would you rather have undergrounding the power lines and then no other improvements other than what's being done in phase 1? Or would you rather have this? It's kind of, there's not, while there is a variety of state funding programs such as urban greening and county level such as metros, active transit, there's a lot of funding sources out there for this type of greening and just livability and comfort. And I think we've seen what's going on with the heat and the wildfires, everything else. We have to start preparing for the next 50 years. There's not any funding for undergrounding power lines other than what we pay in our bills. So that's the reality of where we are on power lines. I hope that answers your question. I'm happy that you do like some of the other improvements.
Thanks, Holly. I'm going to request the number 310394 to please share your feedback. And then after that, Rian. And if I mispronounce anybody's name, please correct me. But please go ahead.
Yeah, this is Dennis DiBiase. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah, I'm the phone number. I'm talking on audio through my telephone. So, okay. But I do see the presentation as well, and as I'm sure you all know, I'm a proponent of this project and everything that you're proposing, and I'm in support 150%. I just have a couple of issues that I've noticed on the plans, and I want to show them to you or present them to you. One is that it looks like the planted medians are only occurring in a couple spots. And those are pretty important if you see your images, your renderings. Trying to increase the amount of planted medians would be very helpful. I know there's an issue with the fire department, but if you can take a look just west of Rigoletto and 2 or 3 locations west of Sale, it looks like that you could actually get some more medians in, and you should take another look at that if you can.
Okay, great.
And then the other thing is between Royer and Fallbrook, it's about 1,100 feet of length, 1,150 feet of length. And it sure looks like it's going to need another crosswalk in the middle of that block, maybe at Gomer's or at Rigoletto also. I'm just concerned that you have some diagonal parking opposite of a business like the Local Peasant, and we haven't really solved that issue of people just jaywalking, and cars going fast. So those are the two things I've seen, and I just wanted to, it's fine tuning, but and again, I want to stress how much I support the project and all the effort that's gone into it. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dennis. Those are both good points of exploring more opportunities for medians in the middle wherever possible. Stephen is just putting those marks with the new crosswalk, if possible, and we will share that with the phase 1 designers too. Ryan, did you want to share your feedback?
Yes, and I just want to say it's great to see a lot of familiar faces in the call, and I just want to especially give a shout out to Dennis, to Kathy, and then Jeff and Elizabeth from CD3, because these folks here have spent a lot of time and dedication over the years working on this, and so I just want to give a shout out to them especially. Specifically, I have to echo what Dennis said. In a lot of ways, as far as activating the public right of way over there, and especially providing more mobility and uses, a crosswalk of some type, whether it be with a dedicated signal hand or with signage or a pedestrian refuge area, would definitely improve the mobility in that area. And I don't know if the traffic consulting team looked at this. But particularly, obviously a new trend in urban design has been especially incorporating bike lanes into the pedestrian right-of-way. And specifically, I think a concern here, I'm not a transportation or traffic engineer per se, but I mean, a definite concern for me is the fact that we have that not parallel, but I'm blanking
Diagonal.
here. Everybody,
Diagonal.
Thank you. Diagonal parking. And so with that, you're mixing, two different uses right there. And especially that's a concern from a traffic safety standpoint. So, I mean, obviously you guys have studied this, but I would encourage the design team to look especially more at ways of how maybe in the wider parts of the right of way, mixing some of those uses together. So basically you do have some of the bike lanes maybe behind some of the traffic. I know that's obviously a larger civil expense, but obviously it's going to provide a more intimate pedestrian experience, and obviously going to provide a better traffic safety solution. And then secondly, if you want to go back to your renderings a little further up in the presentation, and I do have to compliment, I really think these renderings came out quite well. And I think this one here, the west sidewalk improvement, is a good example of maybe that the types of usage you can see. But more importantly, as we know, with different uses of non-fixed furniture in the public right of way, that typically does become a problem with retail security. So if there's more ways to include more civil infrastructural improvements with street furniture, I mean, I see you guys have some benches. I've probably pushed the design team to look at something a little bit more friendly or a little bit more character defining in the area. But obviously look at some of these additional changes. I think some of the ground treatments are quite incredible, and some of the public art installations and the bulb outs are really creative in this sense for this neighborhood. But look at some of those funky, unique infrastructural objects that can really give this more of a placemaking, character defining area that we'll see in other parts of the city. But with that, I'll save my time. I just want to say thank you to everybody. I want to thank the design team. These are quite incredible, and I think this is something I'm super eager and excited, like a lot of us, to see happen. So thank you guys. Great job.
Thank you. And I would request the community participants, if we have asked you and you have shared your feedback, to put down your raised hand. But if you have additional feedback, we like to get as many folks to first at least provide their initial feedback. And then, but of course, call back others. I mean, the people who have already provided feedback to also share more feedback. Holly, I'm not a great multitasker. Did we get any new comments on the during the chat that you would like to share?
Yeah, a couple of them. And I just also wanted to, if people don't know, the way to lower your hand is the same way under reactions. And again, if you are raising it again, that's great, but it does get confusing if we don't know whether we have answered you or not. I do see, Jeff, there's always questions about whether the bike lane should be in front of the diagonal parking or back of the diagonal parking. I'm only on a bicycle myself, and this is another one of these sort of counterintuitive things, but it scares me when I'm doing the parking protected. And there's many reasons for that. Everything from, I think once people have parked their vehicle or they're on the sidewalk, they've kind of checked out of being part of traffic. Very frequently we'll just step off the sidewalk into the lane or step out of a car or you know, someone with a walker or someone, especially someone, you know, it's a big issue with especially the vision impaired folks, because you're channelized, right? There's literally no room to avoid a collision, especially, I don't go very fast, but I've had some close calls, and some people, you know, move pretty quick on their bikes. I know that Jeff answered that, you know, there's, with the number of driveways, intersections without signals, so much of the parking would have to be taken out to make that possible, even from a visibility standpoint. I was going to say one other thing here. So one more thing. Oh, I know what it was, because and thanks, Rian. I mean, it's great. The mid-block crossing, I mean, great, right? We all love those. I know it comes up again and again that the people cross across the street and then dash across to places like the local peasant. And then sometimes when they're coming back, they're maybe a little tipsy or impaired. So it really is a dangerous situation. But it goes back to the same thing about the number, like the sheer number of driveways on the south side of this stretch are such a challenge, right? They're a challenge for the median. They're a challenge for any kind of mid-block crossing, because you still have to have turning space and visibility coming from both directions in and out of those driveways. It's not like we've ignored it. And honestly, we haven't quite, you know, we're still fighting the good fight about seeing where we could add more median space. But right now we're responding to what is being striped and proposed as part of phase one. And so these are in essence the pieces of the median that have been left to us. And we've tried to get planting in them wherever possible. I hope that answers your question. Areas for people to return e-scooters to. Wow. E-scooters are another one of these things that came out of, you know, sort of out of space to our city just a few years ago. And that still has not been, I would say, adequately resolved. You know, some cities like Santa Monica, they paint areas where people should return them. And there's varying levels of success. I think people do just tend to leave them wherever they want to leave the scooter. I mean, luckily we're not short of space, especially in the wider sidewalks here. And I think everybody in the chat, yeah.
If I could just add on the scooters,
Sure,
is under California state law, it's technically illegal to ride them on the sidewalk, and also technically illegal to ride them on a street with a speed limit of 35 miles an hour. So, I mean, you know, you do have a bike lane on a segment here where you could ride them, but it's just it didn't feel like this was a location where we either could or needed to really worry about scooters. And hopefully maybe we'll get to a point where we will need to add that amenity, right? But it didn't feel like something that we needed to address at this point.
Yeah, you're right, Jeff. Doesn't seem like the demand is quite there yet.
So we still have Janice, and I think Janice and Dennis still have their hands up. So Janice, do you have additional feedback that you'd like to share? And I do want to encourage other community members, and some of them have just joined us about 5-10 minutes ago, to please share their feedback. And we are looking again, your input and help to answer two big questions that we have for you, which is number one, you know, what do you like about the improvements and if they're refinements? And then second of all, which improvements would you like to prioritize? So Janice, please go ahead.
First of all, since you were just a number to us, Dennis, I wanted to say, echo what somebody else said. Thank you very much for your leadership on this, to Dennis DiBiase. And then I just wanted to add another comment or question back to about the power lines concern, to just make sure that we did check to see whether there are alternative sources of funding, because I'm not looking to suggest that we do power lines instead of all these other amenities. I'm thinking that maybe there's another pocket somewhere that those funds could be drawn from, having to do with climate change or other infrastructure improvements. So I would just hate to see us going forward and spending all this money and then have an opportunity like that come up right away. And once we've spent this money on the amenities, obviously we're not going to rip them out to put power lines underground. So that's all.
Great. And before I call you, Dennis, to share your feedback, just a couple of questions or thoughts from other community members. Yes, Ryan, the request for increased opportunities for wayfinding and signage. I think that's a great comment. We would definitely like to do. And then Mark had a question with regards to if there was an intent to increase required dedications. Holly, you can add to that if we are trying to acquire additional right of way or not.
Sure, Mark, the intent here is we're just using the available public right of way now. The only thing we're really expanding is where you see the planting areas out in the parking lane is where, at the end of a rank of diagonal parking, you have these sort of odd shaped leftover spots. The one thing that really impacts the future of this project is the ADA compliance issue, which is what it really gets extreme. I think if people are familiar with this stretch, a lot of water moves down the street, so the curb heights are very high, and especially at all the driveways, the cross slope for somebody using a walker or pushing a stroller or a shopping cart or something they're just not only not compliant, but they're a real challenge. And when you bring up right of way, that's a very good point, because it's not only the cost of rebuilding the compliant sidewalks, but almost every one of those driveways, we would have to acquire private parking, private property from the owners of those, whether it's a small shopping center or a large one, a hotel, to really correct this. So I hope that answers your question about right-of-way acquisition.
Great.
Yeah.
So Dennis, you've been very patient. We'd love to hear your additional feedback.
Oh, actually, I just left my hand up. I couldn't figure out how to get it down on my phone. But I will mention that in other parts of the city there are continuous medians, and the driveways don't necessarily dictate not having medians all the time. In other words, you can go to an intersection and make a legal U-turn, and also Ventura Boulevard's lucky in the respect that it has alleys, and you can go down to the next intersection and you can access the parking through alleys. And in fact, there's a lot of businesses that's what they rely on, because they don't have a driveway. So really, it's a big compromise to give up planted medians, and I'm not saying to overdo it or anything, but just a 10-foot long median with a tree in it in a few more places would be very helpful for the feel of the area.
Thanks so much, Dennis. I had a really long discussion with Scott a week or two ago about the same issue. Scott Silverstein, who was another one of the proponents of this, and what I refer to as we're still fighting the good fight to add median space, but it has become and the reason part of the reason they got so reduced, and we weren't even able to put out the plastic bollards or there's the hard rubber kind of curb stop, wheel stop elements that you can put out, was LA Fire Department wanted not the 20 feet clear, that's always been the standard, remains the state fire code standard, but started to say now they want 28 feet in both directions clear, and they wouldn't even accept the plastic bollards, which are completely collapsible. That's why they're out there. These rubber, anything that was mountable, anything, it was just like, it was a hard no. And we really need to, as a city, dig into that deeper, right? This is just a concept plan. We're following on phase 1. So we're just assuming our existing condition is phase 1. But I'd say once funding is approved, secured, definitely we would revisit this, but it's become a citywide, it's kind of a quiet, like it's not gotten, I think, a lot of press other than sort of in Curbed or, Streets blog or something like that. But there was a project on Melrose Avenue that was completely nixed. It was something like a very, complete street, sort of all the curb extensions, and it was just abandoned entirely after an extensive process because fire said they don't want to accept any encroachment basically in our main boulevards and avenues. So we're something we have to get to citywide. Normally if it's DWP or fire, what they say goes. So I don't want to criticize my colleagues in BOE and DOT for just saying, okay. So there's that.
And I think just to add on to what Holly was saying, which I think is a really good summary of, an issue that we run into whenever we try to encourage medians. It's also from the perspective of business owners along the street. So we've heard kind of that the medians make it a little bit harder to make a left turn or, kind of circle into the business. So we want to be mindful of that comment that we've heard as well, but we hear you 100%. We can definitely circle back with fire and LADOT once we summarize all of the comments that we've gotten in this meeting.
Great. And we got another good comment and question from, I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly, Yusult, who asks, with the curbs being so high because of the high level of water when it rains, is it possible to direct some of that water towards the plantings and planted medians? We have taken that into account. And Holly, you can add more to it in terms of what is clearly being envisioned with regards to some of the stormwater planters and really improving the water quality. And maybe I'll show some examples on the map where we are trying to achieve that. Holly, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, I always think that's a great, when you do see those high curbs, thank you. So that's an indication that, right, they're designed that way because there's expected very large volumes of water. So we are looking for all of the opportunities where we can direct the runoff water directly into the planters. It's a little bit more difficult you'd have to reconstruct I would say reconstruct. It's a little bit difficult in medians per se, because if you think about our streets are crowned in the middle, they're higher in the middle. We're looking at ways to infiltrate water wherever and whenever possible, definitely. And it may end up being more, I'm not, if you don't know what a dry well is, there's nothing sexy about a dry well. It's completely invisible, but that might be a solution. It's one that is tending to be the go-to in a lot of our city right-of-way improvements. We're at a bit of a greater challenge out here just because to get into water policy in California, but DWP doesn't have the rights to draw from the groundwater this far west. So they are a very willing partner to come in and pay for those type of these dry wells that just take the surface water and get it down, infiltrate into the ground, which of course would then be accessible to all of the plantings. And they will be, we'll have to irrigate them until they're established, but most of these things should take care of themselves after 3 to 5 years establishment. I hope that answers your question. It's just, it's a challenge. I was the architect on the first Green Street that the city implemented down near Elysian Valley, Frogtown, near the LA River, and all of the issues you just don't think about street sweeping that came up, about, you know, just we're doing it wherever we can, and we'll continue to push for that.
And as Holly was talking about, you can literally begin to see that, you know, essentially all of our project area is either concrete or asphalt. But if you just take your eye to what is being colored in different shades of green, whatever, if it's planted or just simple paving, pervious paving, you can see the transformation of turning this 99% impervious surface to something that is much softer and lets in soak water, thereby, you know, improving the water quality. And as Janice mentioned, we have to take into account all our weather changes and climate change. So it is responding to the larger community concerns that we have heard at a number of different community forums. We like to keep this conversation going. Love to hear from people who have not shared their feedback, and especially hear their feedback as it relates to the kind of improvements they like or would like to see a little more refined. We heard great comments about increased wayfinding, signage, a little more funky placemaking elements that also help improve the overall identity and what makes a place memorable. So thoughts, comments from community members who have not shared their feedback, we would love to hear that.
And thanks, Mukul, for, you know, reminding us about just taking out some of the concrete goes a long way toward helping with the stormwater situation. And as much as I worked in the urban forestry realm for 15 or more years, I forget trees themselves, right? The more trees are a really great way to intercept, to slow the velocity and soak in water over time versus just racing down the street to the nearest storm drain. And we did have questions about, you know, could there be different materiality for the diagonal parking to add more texture and color? I know some of the comments that have come in from the survey responses on our project website, the bit.ly/Reimagine Ventura site, also brought up things like they would like to see brick or other things, that concrete. The flip side of that is we've really tried to keep everything as much as possible in terms of the materials as the standard materials that are used in the city, because when things are patched and repaired, they don't have something different in there. You know, what do they have? If you go to any city maintenance yard, they have concrete and they have asphalt and some DG, some decomposed granite, and that's about the range that we have enormous area to take care of and keep in reasonable repair. And then I was going, the question about brick, because that one comes up every once in a while. And even the Woodland Hills Streetscape Plan does call for brick banding. It goes back to that same issue. Brick is a softer material. It doesn't have the same wear surface as concrete, and secondary, or, you know, given this may be the coolest summer, we'll look back in fondness on 2021 and think, why were we complaining back then? It's red is a very heat absorptive color and material. So the concrete, you know, concrete is much better than asphalt. And we do have other comments about from Janice, is that she's on the bicycle advisory committee, and you know, she wants to you know, see if we could also engage as a community discussion with the fire department, because it disturbs a lot of us that we think that it's only about moving the fire trucks as quickly as possible. We know most of those calls are response to accidents. And if we reduce the accidents, we're also increasing, the reliability of our emergency response. Renan is asking for additional protection from the bike lane, not without taking out another lane, for bollards even, or to raise it. It's a tough one.
It is a very tough balancing act, and I think so. To the credit of the phase one designers, that's what they did. They tried to balance the need of different modes of travel, but at the same time also the needs of having parking to access the businesses. Speaking of materiality, and what you were talking about, brick paving and other materials, Ryan also talked about if there was an opportunity to actually have a different material treatment to the diagonal parking or just the parking areas in general, that would then, and Ryan, maybe you can speak more to it vocally, that would, the way I see it, that would help reduce the amount of asphalt, and that may be something we can definitely explore. So yes, please, Ryan, you're on mute. Please share your thoughts.
Absolutely, and to the point that Holly brought up from DCP, I think aligning to what the council member's goal was for cool streets and the initiatives he has pushed in Canoga Park, and I can let Jeff and Elizabeth speak more to that. But I recognizing the needs of DOT and BSS with their limited material applications and obviously the labor and skill issue with changing out materials. I think possible treatments like concrete, or even texturing it in some way or another, is within the scope of the city, so to speak. And so to your point regarding just the parking area itself, I think that's the scope that would be the most appropriate, and recognizing what the city needs. And obviously with concrete, you can treat it in different ways to have higher solar reflectivity and things like that. So I'll throw it back to you guys.
That's a great idea. With regards to, especially since we have the bus stops, we usually make sure the boarding, unboarding areas literally where the bus stops are made up of concrete. So that's something we can definitely share with the phase one designers. I'm going to have a hard time. I think Heidi Manning, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, but Heidi, you are sharing your concern about graffiti on the decorative sidewalk designs in the sidewalk. Would there be a protective coating used? And you bring up a very good point, Heidi, and something that we have continuously experienced and learned from our past lessons. As you begin to see this rendering, you really begin to see what we did is we came up with the concept where we would use sidewalk which will have different colors in them. Even if it's standard concrete sidewalk, we would first put a pattern of 2x2 score lines, but within them, we would also allow for a diversity of colors within the standard concrete that you see out here. What this has worked well with us is that in case graffiti happens or oil damage or it needs to be done to be repaired, it doesn't look become patchy. That's not a technical English word, but I'm just using it. And the intent out here is that, it's been our experience. You put in a new sidewalk and AT&T comes and crosses the sidewalk and, destroys it. With this kind of a pattern, it would prevent, or it would seem more intentional and allow for the sidewalk to be repaired if it gets damaged either by graffiti or other kind of damage, like AT&T coming and or any other utility coming and making that change. The same, the aim is not to have a kind of a coating, because once these get power washed, the coating usually comes out, but really go for a treatment that when it is cleaned, it is easily cleanable, washable, and at the same time, does not get damaged when it gets cleaned. I don't know, Holly, if you want to add to Janice's question or answer Heidi's question.
I clean, I report a lot of graffiti to 311, and they can either spray paint over it or they sandblast it, and neither of those options I would want to see happen on the sidewalk here. I mean, I wouldn't want it to get ruined. That was just my concern.
Okay, fair. Good.
Thank you, Heidi. I hate those gray those gray painted squares almost as much as anything they're covering up. But yeah, I think we, as Mukul said, this is the reality of constant change to our public sidewalks. What I didn't know, it's not only constant, but it's accelerating because we're having more and different kinds of utilities, everything from, fiber optic, high speed, cell antennas, you name it. It's like this patch and repair thing. We wanted to have something that would sort of camouflage that, because it will happen. And it's not so difficult to just put a new square of concrete and add a little bit of lamp black or whatever they do to, it's different than a color, right? It's different than a color. It's different than a material like brick. It's something that, and you have the same issue if you're stamping patterns, right? The average person coming out to do a utility trench across the public right of way doesn't have the ability to match any of that. But gray concrete is pretty universal. And then Janice is also asking about other surfaces like pervious concrete in the parking areas and sidewalks. I mean, we'll definitely bring that up going forward. I will say that pervious concrete and pervious asphalt, they both exist. They are more successful in areas where we have rainfall throughout the year. What happens here is that it's a lower, usually more variability, a little bit less structural loading or difficult to control in these small batch custom pervious concrete installations. But then because we go months and months and months with no rain, unless that pervious concrete or asphalt is really continuously power washed and swept and all those little fine bits of grit are removed from the pore space, after a couple of years, it's just as impervious as regular concrete. It's unfortunate, but it's just a climate effect of where we are here. We will ask for it. We're looking for permeable areas in the street where we can fit them in at all possible, accepting the driveways and all the other impacts here. And I hope that does answer your question, Janice.
And just to add to that, anything pervious is definitely so much nicer in improving our water quality and not just having them wash into the pipes, but we usually have to install under drains. That does increase both the maintenance as well as the initial construction cost if we want them to be successful in terms of their perviousness. I know we have a few minutes left. Again, I would request community members who have not shared their thoughts either by chat or sharing it vocally with us. We would love to hear your feedback. I do want to remind folks that in case you're right now not in a position to share your feedback, to please go to the survey. And I'm just going to request last set of thoughts from the community members before we talk about next steps. I see Heidi, you had a comment about dog walkers. Could there be a small grassy area where a dog could relieve themselves and then dog waste bags, dispensers be provided? Yes, I think so. We can definitely explore that. I don't think so the dog will discriminate or wait for a grassy area, but I clearly hear a lot of the people, and some actually talked about even on Tuesday, dog walking, maybe one kind of an amenity or experience that they would like to see as part of Main Street, especially in the evenings and mornings. Um, Also, you talked about drinking fountains for both people and dogs. Again, that's a good comment that we can definitely explore. Um, Other folks, final thoughts. Holly, do you want to share your contact info as we go into
Sure.
next steps?
Yeah, I put it in the chat, but it also is on the postcard if you were notified that way about these open houses. And encourage you, again, the survey does have some sort of checkbox areas, but I don't think there's any limit on the comments that you can provide. You can make really long form comments, or definitely just reach out to me directly. And my email follows the city format of Holly, HOLLY, .Harper, HARPER, at lacity.org, or my city phone number is 213-847-3706. I did also, thanks Isul, about, he's had a couple private, I hope I'm not outing him, he had a couple private messages about bike racks that can be art. I think definitely. And Mukul showed some images of that in his presentation. Was also asking about the possibility of solar panels being mounted above bus stops. And I said, well, we'll talk later, because it's a very complicated issue about how we manage our transit amenities. I don't know, Michelle, I know we're getting new types of transit shelters out in the city, but I don't know, did you, and they're being rolled out as kind of a demonstration project between the two major vendors that we're deciding as a city to move forward on. Did you see any provision of solar panels, or was that?
On the transit shelters, that's something that we're discussing with the two teams that are kind of the top winning bidders so far in the sidewalk transit amenities program. And we'll have to work closely with them. I think it would make sense to have, the transit shelters here, especially with the investment. They're not all of the existing transit shelters are being replaced with the new shelters. That mapping is happening right now to make sure that, the shelters are placed equitably. But we can look into that and definitely see if there's plans to place one of the newer shelters in this area.
Yeah, we don't have any out here now. And then Courtney Schoenwald's also with city planning out in the valley. She says that one of the vendors is proposing solar panels. We don't have any shelters out there today. And I said, it's kind of a long issue because you would look around and you would think that those transit shelters are a city provided amenity, but they're actually a private company that uses the ad revenue to partially defray the cost in many cases. And so it's not something we have entire control over. That helps understand.
And with that, I would strongly encourage all the community members who have shared their thoughts, as well as those who have not, to continue the discussion. There are no bad ideas. We'll definitely try our best to incorporate some of these new thoughts and ideas. And even if they cannot be incorporated because of cost or other concerns, that should not stop you all from sharing your thoughts. If not in this project, it builds the momentum for the next project. So please continue sharing your thoughts. Like Holly mentioned, please use this website. We have a survey on, which will be on for the next couple of months till mid-September. We promise we are going to read each and every survey, and also post these two community meetings that we have done, one Tuesday evening and this one that we are right now doing on the website. So your friends, your neighbors, your fellow business owners, or patrons who come to your businesses, please request them to go to the website, shared their thoughts about this survey. It really helps us refine these design concepts. And the more people we hear from, the better it is as we go after future grant opportunities. Grantors always look to see that this has community buy-in and ownership, and that is always a key criteria to get implementation funds. And with that, Michelle or Holly, do you have any final thoughts as before we wrap up this meeting?
I would like to say, yeah, and the feedback survey, it does ask to collect your email information, which may make some people a little nervous or, you know, I don't know. But one of the reasons is that I will follow up with everybody. Questions that are there, comments that are there. And again, I encourage you to reach out to me directly. Courtney Schoenwald said that the new transit shelters, the 2 vendors are proposing, are also being sort of mocked up. They're going to be out on the street. I think it's like noon to 11 or something. It's an all-day thing, July 23rd and 24th in Reseda. And the website there to get more information of the details of where in Reseda and the hours are. It's in the chat, but that is one word: streetsla.lacity.org/STAP. So it's a transit amenities program, and we're looking forward for the next decades to have a new vendor and new features in some of the transit shelters. So, and I know there'll be people out there collecting people's thoughts, collecting what they think about one versus the other, or what's been left out, what's what's wrong, what's good. And then there's another about electric charging stations, which is a great comment. Kind of follows on with Janice about the water, the water in drinking water for people, drinking water for pets. I mean, luckily we are changing. I mean, we're a big city, we're really spread out, but DWP is really, and the mayor's office, I know especially, is engaged in the electric charging stations, public charging stations out in the public right of way. And DWP is also looking at kind of a fancy name for a drinking fountain, a hydration station. It just means it's a place that you could also fill a water bottle more easily with purified water. So, and then, yeah, electronic boards at bus stops. I think that is some of the features being considered together with the solar panels. So we're getting, I think the slow process, but I think our direction is forward in the city of Los Angeles.
Great.
Michelle, do you have any final
I'd just like to thank everyone for your time today. I know we're about at that time. Really appreciate all of the helpful and constructive comments. I think your comments will certainly help to make this an even better project, and we'll be back with a final proposal as one of our next steps. So you'll be hearing from us within the next few months.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for spending your late afternoon with us. We really appreciate it, and hope everyone has a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Goodbye.